Hey, it's your girl, your favorite paralegal, aka Cassandra Lynn, and welcome to Legal Doc Talk 24/7. Hey, y'all. So, if you have not heard, Diddy out here handing out lawsuits like Christmas presents. He's not playing with nobody, and he's tired of y'all putting bad juju on his name. So, if y'all have seen on the internet, he has sued NBC, Universal Media, and Peacock for the documentary Diddy, The Making of a Bad Boy. So I'm assuming he ain't too pleased about that documentary. So we're going to tap right on into this petition that was filed in a New York State court. As of right now, it is still pending, so it hasn't officially been accepted by the court, but it is in the process of being. The only reason it would possibly be rejected if is only if they were missing an attachment to it or missing a signature or anything of that sort. That's the only reason why it will be rejected. It won't have anything to do with the content of the petition. So I just want to make that clear. So here it does show that it's Sean Combs versus NBC Universal Media and Peacock TV and Ample LLC doing business as Ample Entertainment. Now, I did not well, I kind of figured that Peacock was kind of like I would say like sibling or a daughter or son of NBC, but I never connected two and two together. And now that I'm reading this, I'm like, okay, I see the connection now. But Diddy's not playing with them. Um so here's the nature of the action, the reason as to why he is suing NBC. And it reads that for nearly a century, NBC has been a trusted name in the news, a leader in broadcasting important stories to citizens who depend on reputable media to stay informed, grossly exploiting the trust and shamelessly capitalizing on the public's insatiable appetites for content about Mr. Combs. In the lead up to his criminal trial, defendants made a conscious decision to line their own pockets at the expense of truth, decency, and basic standards of professional journalism. In January of 2025, racing to outdo the competition for the most salacious Diddy expose, defendants maliciously and recklessly broadcast an outrageous set of fresh lives and conspiracy theories in a purported documentary they called Diddy, The Making of a Real I'm sorry, The Making of a Bad Boy. I have not watched this, but now that this has came out, I'm about to go watch it. Cause I'm just thinking they got actual, people to tell their stories, their experiences with Diddy's. They probably took these lawsuits. It could be a number of things, but everything that he has done thus far is allegedly. In the documentary, defendants accused Mr. Combs of horrible crimes, including serial unaliving and sexual assault of minors, knowing that there is not a shred of evidence to support them. As one independent critic observed after the documentary aired, it's remarkable that filmmakers were able to get this thing past the corporate council at NBC Universal. For example, the documentary maliciously accuses Mr. Combs of unaliving the love of his life and mother to his children, Kimberly Porter, despite the fact that the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office have confirmed that her unaliving was from natural causes and that there has been never been any evidence of foul play. The documentary advances the false narrative that it cannot be a coincidence that Miss Porter and others in Mr. Combs' orbit have been unalived in a malicious attempt to insinuate that Mr. Combs unalived them. In support, the documentary features YouTube channel clips from known conspiracy theorists strung together with an anonymized YouTube comments speculating about this purported coincidence. By maliciously advancing the unhinged narrative that Mr. Combs is a serial unaliver with absolutely no evidence or logic to stand on, and in the face of clear evidence to the contrary, Defendants spread fake news and the most damaging kind. Now, I must agree, you can't sit here and now you could everything in a complaint is alleged. I get that, but also depending on the case, such as an actual assault case, you don't have you just have to have just enough evidence to file a loose lawsuit. But when you're doing a documentary, I don't know, you can't just be putting information out there that you have no tangible evidence. So I do agree with this, the reasoning as to why he would file a lawsuit. You can't come out here and because I've heard the conspiracy theories. I've heard that, they believe that he had something to do with Kim's unaliving, but there's no actual tangible evidence to tie him to that. The documentary also accuses Mr. Combs of having sex with minors, based entirely on a false claim by an anonymous interviewee that he saw two girls follow Mr. Combs into a room in his groundless speculation that for sure they were underage. This story, upon information and belief, rehashed from a baseless lawsuit seeking 30 million, has already been discredited by the adult women in their 30s referenced in that lawsuit who have come towards to say that they were adults at the time. In making and broadcasting their falsehoods, among others, defendants seek only to capitalize on the public's appetite for scandal without any regard for the truth and at the expense of Mr. Combs' right to a fair trial. All right, so I already told you guys who the parties are. Let's get to the background. So, Mr. Combs became famous with his extraordinary and historic achievements as a musician and music producer, hip hop impresario, record label owner, fashion designer, path breaking spirits entrepreneur, committed philanthropist, and a cultural icon. Mr. Combs is among the most accomplished businessmen of his generation. In September of 2024, Mr. Combs was indicted into the Southern District of New York on federal racketeering and ex trafficking charges. Mr. Combs entered a plea of not guilty on those charges on September 17, 2024, empathically and unequivocally denied these charges against him, and is preparing to contest the government's evidence, such as it is, at trial beginning on May 5th, 2025. Mr. Combs has faith in the integrity of the judicial system and is confident the jury will acquit him. In or around December 10th, 2024, defendant Ample informed Mr. Combs' representative that it was producing a documentary not about the government's allegations against him, but rather regarding distinct allegations, including theories of his involvement in the unaliving of Kim Porter and Christopher Wallace, and allegations of sex with underage girls. Now, I I'm kind of side eyeing this because if y'all tuned into the Keefe D live that I did where I was reading his interviews from the FBI, he even stated, because he lied the first two times, the first two interviews, but I believe it was either the third or the fourth interview where he came and say, "Hey, Diddy hired me to off Tupac." So I don't put anything past this man. I'm just saying. In response, Mr. Combs' representatives told defendant Ample that those allegations were unequivocally false and amount to nothing more than unverified conspiracy theories. Mr. Combs' representatives also pointed out the allegations that have already been thoroughly debunked and lack any credible evidence. Underadhered by these warnings, on January 2nd, 2025, defendants Ample and NBCU released a trailer for the documentary. The trailer portrays Mr. Combs as a dangerous monster who threw sinister parties with underage girls and threatened to ship and sell women off to anyone. On January 8th and 9th, 2025, representatives of Mr. Combs sent letters informing defendants Ample and NBCU that the trailer included false and defamatory statements and urged them to take down the trailer and refrain from publishing the documentary. Defendants Ample and NBCU did not respond. On or around January 13th, 2025, defendant Ample and NBCU released the documentary to select press outlets to increase publicity prior to its release date. On January 14th, 2025, defendant NBCU made the documentary publicly available for viewing on its streaming platform Peacock. Defendants NBCU and Apple also widely publicized the documentary to get as many streams as possible. In one interview, The Hollywood Reporter, co founder of Defendant Ample and an executive producer of the documentary, Ari Mark, acknowledged that the documentary was a rush job because of competing documentaries on the same subject, saying there's no time and this was an extremely fast turnaround. Oh, what's throwing me off is this the alignment. I like Justified. I hate when it's hanging. Oh, okay. Um the documentary includes numerous false and defamatory statements that defendants NBCU and Ample knew were false or published with reckless disregard as to whether they were false or not. Indeed, the entire premise of the documentary assumes that Mr. Combs has committed numerous heinous crimes, including serial unaliving, rape of minors, and ex trafficking of minors, and attempts to crudely psychologize him. It maliciously and baselessly jumps to the conclusion that Mr. Combs is a monster and an embodiment of Lucifer, ooh, and with a lot of similarities to Jeffrey Epstein. Hmm. In doing so, the documentary advances the following profoundly injurious false accusations. False statements that Mr. Combs is a serial unaliver. The documentary falsely, recklessly, and maliciously accused Mr. Combs of unaliving Kimberly Porter and Biggie, aka Christopher Wallace, Andre Harrell, Dwight Arrington. Ooh, what? Heavy D for real? And attempted to unalive Albert Joseph Brown, who is known as Albie Sure. It shamelessly advances conspiracy theories that lack any foundation in reality, repeatedly insinuating that Mr. Combs is a serial unaliver because it cannot be a coincidence that multiple people in Mr. Combs' orbit have been unalived. Miss Porter was Mr. Combs' romantic partner for over a decade and the mother of his four children. She was, as he often described her publicly, the love of his life. In 2018, Miss Porter tragically was unalived after a battle with complications from pneumonia. The Los Angeles coroner's office confirmed that her unaliving was a result of natural causes. Christopher Wallace, an American rapper and close friend of Mr. Combs, was unalived in a drive-by powwowing in 1997. There has never been a hint of evidence to suggest that Mr. Combs was involved in this tragic unaliving of his friend. Andre Harrell was a prominent music executive who died unalived of heart failure in 2020. There has never been a hint of evidence to suggest that he was unalived, let alone that Mr. Combs was responsible for his unaliving. Dwight Arrington Mayers, Heavy D, was an American rapper and producer who was unalived of a pulmonary embolism in 2020. Has never been a hint of evidence that suggests that he was unalived, let alone that Mr. Combs was responsible for his unaliving. Mr. Combs had long-standing, deep personal relationships with Miss Porter, Mr. Wallace, Mr. Harrell, and Mr. Myers. He was heartbroken by the untimely unalivings and the completely unfounded accusation that he unalived multiple of his closest confidants. Is deeply distressing, offensive, reckless, and malicious. And yet, despite all evidence to the contrary, defendants NBCU and Ample falsely accused Mr. Combs of being a serial unaliver. The documentary includes an interview with Albie Shore, who conclusively asserts that Miss Porter was unalived, adding, "Do I have to say allegedly?" He further falsely claims that before her death, Miss Porter was keeping a diary and was planning to reveal all, but that someone implied, no, wait, impliedly, Mr. Combs, found out that she was writing what was going on behind closed doors. Al B. Sure asserts that a lot goes on in the industry and that those who speak about it usually meet their demise. He further falsely claims that Miss Porter is gone because she was going to be the next Cassie Ventura, by which he meant she was about to blow the lid off the entire situation. Sure's statements that Mr. Combs unalived Miss Porter and that he did so to prevent Miss Porter from revealing information are false and defamatory. Defendants Ample and NBCU knew those statements were false or published them in reckless disregard of the truth. The documentary gives additional credence to the dangerous and damaging lies about Miss Porter's unaliving. For example, it features commentary by an attorney, Ariel Mitchell, who rhetorically asks, who is dying from pneumonia? Seriously, pneumonia? And to die so quickly. Notwithstanding the coroner's report to the contrary, Mitchell ridicules the idea that Miss Porter was unalived of natural causes, saying people get pneumonia every day and don't be unalived. That doesn't seem like a natural cause. In the documentary, I'll be sure, Oslo falsely claims that he is a witness in connection with legal proceedings surrounding Miss Porter's unaliving, preventing him from elaborating in the interview. This is also false. There is no investigation into Miss Porter's unaliving, which the Los Angeles coroner's office has deemed natural and caused by a lobar pneumonia. By suggesting that law enforcement is investigating Miss Porter's unaliving and that Albie Shore is a witness, defendant NBCU and Ample maliciously credit the false claim that Mr. Combs is being investigated by Miss Porter's unaliving. Sure's statements that law enforcement is investigating Mr. Combs' involvement in Miss Porter's unaliving are false and defamatory. Defendants Ample and NBCU knew those statements are false or published them in reckless disregard of their falsity. At the time they published the documentary, defendants NBCU and Ample knew that Miss Porter died of natural causes and that there were no support for Albie Shore's claim that she was unalived. Defendant NBCU and Ample also knew that Albie Shore, Miss Porter's ex, before she started dating Mr. Combs, was an unreliable source and that Albie Shore had long held a grudge against Mr. Combs. In an interview with Hollywood Reporter, Ari Mark, who is the co founder of Defendant Ample and executive producer of the documentary, acknowledged Shure's weird, very kind of complicated relationship with Sean Combs, yet Mark wanted his participation in the film because we think it would be a better film as a result, and asked for whatever you're comfortable sharing at this particular moment in time within the trajectory of the saga. Betraying a total disregard for whether Shure's weird relationship with Mr. Combs might cause him to lie, Mark added, I think we really took off the pressure and said, let's just have a conversation. Let's sit down and see where this goes. In the documentary, Albie Shore also falsely claims that his own health problems were the result of an attempted unaliving perpetrated by Mr. Combs. He claims that Miss Porter warned him, don't get involved, you will get unalived. And she was putting her life in danger, trying to save him, and that there were people, implying Mr. Combs, involved in the attempted unaliving of Albie Shore. The documentary maliciously advances this narrative, notwithstanding the fact that Albie Shore's medical problems were consistent with complications associated with his bariatric surgery, and that there is no support whatsoever for his baseless claims. Shore's statements that Mr. Combs attempted unaliving him are false and defamatory. Defendant NBCU and Ample knew those statements were false or published them in reckless disregard of the truth. From there, the documentary advances an unhinged conspiracy theory that Mr. Combs is responsible for the unaliving of Andre Harrell and Dwight Arrington Myers, aka Heavy D, in addition to Kim Porter speculating that it would be too much of a coincidence that Harrell, Heavy D, and Kim Porter all passed due to natural causes. In an effort to tie these desperate events together, the documentary falsely asserts that all three were posed to go public and some unspecified inside information and were unalived as a result, presumably by Mr. Combs. For example, Albie Shore states the person was telling a story. This person was writing a book. This person's about to tell the truth. Why is everybody unalived? Oh, it's a coincidence? Get the uck out of here. To further advance the false narrative, the documentary includes a clip from a YouTube interview with Jaguar Wright, a conspiracy theorist who, oh Lord, he done named Jag, who skeptically points out that of the five people who she says started Uptown Records, the only two people left are Puffy and Albie Shore, and Al almost died. She insinuates that both Harold and Heavy D did not actually die of heart attacks, skeptically stating Heavy D was found dead, heart attack. Andre Harold, heart attack. In a bizarre attempt to bolster this conspiracy theory, the documentary includes what appears to be internet comments to Jaguar Wright's YouTube interview on this topic. That commentary states, Jag be connected them not dots. Fact or coincidence, you gotta admit, is really interesting. Others say, damn, she really pieced that together. I never looked at it that way. And Jaguar White is not lying. Child, Puffy can't be surrounded by this many coincidences. The documentary adds another that says it's no coincidence that all the original employees, except for Albie, are unalived. Mind you, after Albie spoke against Diddy after Kim Porter's unaliving, he was in a coma for several months. The common denominator is Diddy. The statements by Sure and Wright that Mr. Combs was responsible for the unalivings of Miss Porter, Mr. Harrell, Mr. Myers, and the attempted unaliving of Sure are false and defamatory. Defendants Ample and NBCU knew those statements were false or published them in reckless disregard for the truth. The documentary also advances the baseless conspiracy theory that Mr. Combs was involved in the unaliving of Biggie. It features an interview with Gene Dill, a former bodyguard who apparently worked for Mr. Combs between the mid 1990s and 2005. Dill claimed that in the week in which Big was unalived, Mr. Combs was acting real anxious trying to get Big at this party. He further claimed that when Mr. Combs suggested going to the party that evening, Mr. Dill warned him, if we go to this party tonight, we're going to get unalived. Somebody going to be unalived. But that Mr. Combs said, I don't want to hear that ish. The producer can be heard egging Dill on, asking, do you think that he had any involvement in Biggs' unaliving? Dill answered, did he directly have something to do with it? He could have. And that brings me back to that interview with the feds and Keefe D when he said because Diddy kept calling asking him if it had been taken care of. I'm just saying. There has never been any evidence that Mr. Combs was involved in Biggie's unaliving. The statements suggesting that Mr. Combs was involved in Biggie's unaliving are false and defamatory. Defendants Ample and NBCU knew they were false or published them in reckless disregard for the truth. By providing Deal with a platform for insinuating that Mr. Combs was responsible for the unaliving, defendants acted with malice and total disregard for the truth. Now let's talk about the false accusations about the ex with minors. The defamatory also the documentary also falsely and maliciously asserts that Mr. Combs was having ex with and was ex trafficking underage girls. In particular, the documentary features an interview with an anonymized subject who appears with his image blacked out and his voice distorted. In the documentary, this unidentified interviewee claimed that while he was employed by Mr. Combs, he was sent on missions to go to the clubs to recruit some girls and bring them back to the house, but he didn't know what the real intention was, falsely implying that there was foul play involved. He further falsely claimed that Mr. Combs was ucking and making love and X to girls who, for sure, they were underage. The documentary then cuts to a portion of an unidentified legal document that states present at the parties and in it W underage girls. I'm assuming that says with underage girls. The documentary falsely implies that this unidentified document in corroboration. In fact, it is a copy of a civil complaint brought by Rodney Jones against Mr. Combs containing the false allegations and seeking 30 million in purported damages. The documentary does not include, however, the fact that those allegations about minors have been thoroughly discredited. After Jones filed his lawsuit, which identified the alleged underage females, those adult women in their 30s came forth to say that they were not underage at the time and that they were never witnessed anything untoward happened at the parties, including the red lit party house featured in a documentary. Now, there have been more petitions out there where individuals have claimed that they were underage. So, why are they just specifically zooming in on the Jones lawsuit? Hmm. Jones' statements that Mr. Combe had ex with and ex traffic underage girls are false and defamatory. Defendants Ample and NBCU knew that Jones' claims were false or published them in reckless disregard of the truth. False accusations about the existence of sexually explicit videos of Mr. Combs with minors and celebrities. In the documentary, defendants Ample and NBCU also maliciously claim that there are flash drives of X tapes with 8 distinct individuals, including A-list celebrities and Diddy, all engaged in X. The documentary features claim by an attorney, Ariel Mitchell, that her client, Courtney Burgess, possesses these videos. And y'all know that Courtney and Ariel is also in the process of being sued by Diddy. So, Courtney Burgess has been described as a one time industry bit player and a fringed character. In recent months, seeking to capitalize on the media's insatiable appetite for celebrity scandal, Burgess has gone to great lengths to invent and publicize outrageous falsehoods about Mr. Combs. In media interviews, Burgess claims he has worked in the music industry for decades, but he has no public record of any professional achievements and he left no detectable footprint on the industry prior to his recent campaign to malign Mr. Combs. His malicious conduct, which, according to the New York Times, has only amped up the circus like frenzy surrounding Mr. Combs' case, is intended to garner publicity to profit from the attention surrounding Mr. Combs' legal proceedings. Burgess has never met Mr. Combs and has never had any relationship with anyone in Mr. Combs' family. Nevertheless, Burgess has claimed on multiple occasions that Kimberly Porter provided him with a copy of her memoir and videos depicting Mr. Combs sexually assaulting inebriated celebrities and minors. Those close to Miss Porter, including her children and her roommate for over 20 years, has never heard of Mr. Burgess before he made the utterly implausible and completely false claim. Despite Burgess' inconsistent, implausible accounts, defendants Ample and NBCU chose to air his false claims through his attorney, Ariel Mitchell, who repeated Mr. Burgess' lies that Mr. Burgess possessed video depicting Mr. Combs sexually assaulting celebrities and minors. The documentary includes Mitchell's false accusations that Mr. Combs used these purported recordings to advance his influence and his power and threaten to take this to your wife, take this to your husband, take this to the public, and I'll ruin you if you don't do this for me. Defendants NBCU and Ample knew or recklessly disregarded that Burgess did not possess such videos because they did not view any such videos themselves, nor did they obtain any other evidence of their existence. Indeed, they could not have since such videos do not exist. Moreover, defendants NBCU and Ample knew that Mitchell was a wholly unreliable character. As would have been reflected in simple Google search, Mitchell had previously made ridiculous claims that research indicated that baby oil can be used as a conduit for transmitting rugs mixed into oil to another person for the purpose of incapacitating them. Mitchell was previously accused of bribing a witness to change her testimony to corroborate claims filed by Mitchell, and Mitchell has a history of filing frivolous claims and then withdrawing from the lawsuits when the lies come to light. In truth, there are no such videos. They never were any such videos. Mitchell and Burgess are the sources of the vile rumors. The defendants NBCU and Ample are responsible for maliciously perpetrating them. The statements in the documentary that such video exists and were used as blackmail are false and defamatory. Defendants NBCU and Ample knew these statements were false and prohibited them in reckless disregard for the truth. Defendants' malicious lies have materially injured Mr. Combs. As set forth above, defendants have made false and defamatory statements about Mr. Combs, knowing that they were false when with reckless disregard of their falsity. Defendants made these false and defamatory statements in bad faith as part of a deliberate effort to damage Mr. Combs' reputation, undermine his businesses, and by painting him as a debauched and a pedophile, to poison the public's perception of him and deprive him of a fair trial. Defendants eagerly peddled these lies to enrich themselves, knowing that those claims were false or making no effort to verify the truth of those false claims. As a result, defendants' malicious lies, Mr. Combs has suffered significant reputational and economic harm. Defendants' lies and conspiracy theories have reached millions. Moreover, many viewers published and republished the documentary's content. The unrelenting tide of negative publicity resulting from defendants' lies have caused and will continue to cause Mr. Combs significant reputational and economic harm. Defendants' intentionally false and defamatory statements have also poisoned the minds of the overwhelmingly majority of individuals residing in the Southern District of New York who might qualify to serve for jury service and potentially sit on a jury in Mr. Combs' trial beginning May 2025. Thus, in addition to all of the other harms resulted from defendants' unlawful false statements, they have also threatened his ability to have a fair trial on the government's charges against him. So he is suing them one for defamation because they made false and defamatory statements concerning him in the documentary. And that had the tendency to expose and did expose him to hatred, contempt, ridicule, and disgrace. I strongly believe that people felt that way after they saw him beating Cassie up and down the hotel hall. And that's just my opinion. But after that, first of all, I never believed when he said that he didn't do it. I was like, you did it. And then the video came and that just confirmed everything. So the statements published by defendants about plaintiff accused plaintiffs of committing serious crimes. I could say that crimes, including unaliving and sexual assault of minors and engaging in sexual misconduct. The statements published by defendants about plaintiff were defamatory per se because they accused plaintiff of committing serious crimes and intended to injure plaintiff in his trade, business, and profession by implicating him in serious crimes. I do agree with this. Like you can't be just saying people are, putting people's names in situations without any tangible evidence. I do believe that. Now I'm on the fence about this because, as I stated before, with the Keefe D interview, when he said that Diddy was the one that actually put out the hit for Tupac, and that he kept calling and asking it. I don't know. It's just some things, but overall, you can't just be like, okay, this person is responsible for this person's unaliving, and you don't have no connection, no tangible evidence to back that up. So I do agree. And this is not like it's an investigation. This is clearly a documentary that is putting out these false statements. So that's a little bit different. So I understand why he is suing. That is defamation. The statements published by defendants about plaintiff were defamatory per se because they accused a plaintiff of committing serious crimes and intended to injure. I already read that. The defendants published the statements without privilege to a third party. Defendants published the statements with actual malice, with the goal of driving viewership of the documentary at the expense of truth. Defendants published the statements with knowledge of their falsity and reckless disregard for the veracity. The defamatory statements published by defendant about plaintiff had directly and proximately caused plaintiff substantial reputational and financial harm and damaged his right to a fair trial on the government's charges against him. Diddy is asking for $100 million in this one, awarding plaintiff money damages in amount to be determined. Oh, but not less than $100 million. So he's asking for, at the minimum, 100 million thousand, and he's demanding a jury trial. So based off of what we know from like the Keefe D interviews with the feds, um the lawsuits that have came out, the SA lawsuits, the Cassie video, um what do y'all think about this? I mean, I understand where they're going with this on the legal side because it is defamatory, especially if you don't have any concrete evidence or tangible evidence to link him to these unalivings. Now, when it comes to the actual assaults, is a little bit different because only just a small portion is needed in order for somebody to file a lawsuit claiming that you actually assaulted them. And then they go through the litigation process where they obtain more information, documents, witness statements, so on and so forth. So that's one thing. But when you're putting somebody's name in a unaliving, that's totally different. And then for it to be in a documentary for millions of people to see, that's another thing. Then on top of that, like they said, many people who live in the Southern District, New York, they have the potential of being jurors. And so it's not hard to not know what's going on with Diddy because it is all over the place. Hell, we're reporting it on YouTube. People are reporting it in the news. People are talking about it. So I do feel that it does interfere with him having a right to a fair trial. So, y'all let me know what y'all think about this in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until then, you all be blessed and I'm out. Bye.